Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I'm Nick here with you as always. Thanks for joining us for another episode. This week, as per a viewer's request, we have the journey, if you will, of Jack Daniel's relatively recent, within the past few years, we're talking journey into changing up their mash bill, which they haven't done since before Prohibition, and was looking to make rye the predominant grain in the mash bill. Whereas before, in the traditional, what I poured in here is just traditional Jack Daniel's Black Label, is about 80% corn, and then it's, I believe it's 12% malted barley and 8% rye. So it's not like they're introducing rye into the mash bill for the first time, but they're making it the predominant grain for the first time in their history. So basically what we've ended up with, and I reviewed it last episode, is the part of the single barrel version with the single barrel select rye. And what you get in that mash bill is 70% rye, 18% corn, and 12% malted barley. So in terms of, you'll see as we go through here how we classify each type of whiskey is interesting. Yes, it's Tennessee whiskey, but with the rye and the age that it is, at which point can we call it, at which point do you call it a rye, which point can you call it a straight rye, all those kind of things. Tennessee rye, all those fun things. So, let's start out with the first inception. Now this is the Jack Daniel's Unaged rye, and it was advertised as such. It was not a finished quality product. It was basically a really interesting release by Jack Daniel's, and most importantly, Master Distiller Jeff Arnett. Really, his project was going into the books and going back and researching how to create new mash bill, right, which hasn't been done since before Prohibition, which I already said. But this bottle is batch number 1. I believe there's 1 or 2 or maybe 3, I don't know. I've only seen 2, but 2 batches that were released a few years ago. And so this is labeled as an unaged Tennessee rye. Basically, it's a neutral spirit. It's not moonshine. It's bottled at 40% alcohol by volume. And I'm pretty sure if I were to talk to anybody who is actually from the parts of the country rooted in history of making moonshine, they'd probably tell you this isn't it. White dog is a little bit of a better term, I guess, but still is implying that it's right off the stills, unaged. Which, yes, this is, but it's also watered down to 40% ABV. So we're not getting exactly what's running off the stills, but we're getting a standard marketed product proof, if you will. So 80 proof, distilled from grain. I already gave you the mash bill there. And it gives little notes on the side about what's in it. But as always, really the single barrel family decanter, if you will. So let's go in and let's look at the notes. Let's take a look at the color. It isn't going to take too long because it's pretty clear. Yeah, you'll notice when whiskey comes off of the stills, it's clear. No color in it. There may be a little bit of particles floating around and something like that. It's always possible, but no color. So let's go in for the nose. The first thing you're going to notice when you smell this is that's not the Jack Daniel's note that you know and love. It's got a really astringent, medicinal, chemical note to it, really grassy note to it. It's like formaldehyde fertilizer, if you will. It's got a really sharp, sour twinge, if you will, that hits just the top part of your nose there. And a lot of people I've seen will nose this and they're instantly like push it back. One of the big the noses that I get, aromas off of this, is very sour grapes. Now I'm just not talking about like a green grape or something like that that you may sit and eat as a snack or something like that. But I'm talking, you probably left it in the back of the refrigerator for a little bit too long and are just getting around to realizing it's still there without throwing it out, and that's the smell that I'm getting there. It's like a white wine gone bad. But it's not necessarily saying that it's a bad thing. This is just a part of the process. None of those charred new oak barrels have gotten any of their flavors and aromas onto the spirit yet, obviously. But after a while, it does mellow down a little bit. You do start to get a little hint of the rye content in there, a little bit of the spiciness, but a little bit of the creamier notes. And I know you're saying creamy, that's an adjective you describe something you taste, but you can just smell that it's got almost like a baked bread, yeasty type of notes to it in the flavor, which just leads me to think bakery notes. So really interesting. So let's go in for the taste. I gotta say, with the nose, now I've reviewed these all before, you can go back and watch the videos, but the nose is really not that indicative of the taste. The taste, to me, is actually pretty good. It's got similar notes to the nose in the sense of the grape is definitely in there, but it's more muted. And it coats really at the base, the center of the tongue. It's really muted, it's really subtle, and it definitely sticks around for a while. But it's not too bad actually to just sip on. A little bit of that yeasty quality, a little bit of the baked bread notes in there, but something a little bit softer, a little bit creamier. A little bit of vanilla, actually, which is interesting, because most of that you get from the oak. I could see somebody making some summertime cocktails with this, mixing it. I'd probably mix it with Sprite, even though I haven't had soda in, I don't even know how long, 10 years. But just, I don't have anything against it, just I don't drink it. But if I were to mix it with something, I feel like Sprite would be the right way to go there. Almost like a flavored water, if you will. If it weren't watered down so much, you may have something really, really fun to play with, especially for bartenders. You know, they like to experiment with different things. And this has a lot of similarities to gin. Some of the Hendrix that I've had before is obviously a little bit more substantial than this, a little more rounded in flavors, a little more rich, but this has a lot of similarities to it. So, that's great. We'll finish that off later, but we got some other things to get into, and this can't be a 20-hour video. So, next, they came out with the Rested Rye. And people are like, whoa, you can tell that hasn't been opened in a while. That's not a nice sound. But people were a little bit thrown with the Rested Rye because it didn't really tell them too much about it. Didn't really tell them much of what it was. Now this came out 2 years after the Unaged Rye did. So, what does that tell you? Well, it's been aged at least 2 years. Can it be called whiskey? Yes. There's really no minimum for aging whiskey anyways. And it's 2 years. So it's a straight rye whiskey. So a lot of people, I think, thought that was strange or weird or unique only because this was being advertised as, you know, a journey, a process to an end product, which was eventually finding this to get into next. But I think a lot of people were thrown a little bit by the Rested Rye Maybe because they didn't know what they were going to call it. So you can see the color after 2 years. Those new heavily charred American white oak barrels that Jack Daniel's forged and fired are imparting their color into the glass, which is really nice and has similarities to some of the, shall I say, better scotches that aren't entirely doused with caramel or anything like that. Maybe some little bit, but I'm thinking something like Ben Romick with a nice little color. The 10-year that I did has a similar color to this just by looking at it, which is really interesting. So let's go in and try the 2-year rested rye. Just a faint hint of the grape that was in the unaged rye, but now what I'm getting is more candy-like notes, if you will, a little sweet and sour. Definitely something that's tart and fruity, things like grape, but not, again, not the overripe or rotten grapes, but something that's very fresh, very flavorful, very fragrant. Little bit of vanilla picking up on there, just a hint, a dash of cinnamon, a little bit of nutmeg there. Starting to pick up a little bit of those bourbon type notes that you get, but not overly so. The nose isn't really too punchy. Now again, this is bottled as well, let me just check, at 40% ABV. Now just so you know, this is the second batch. So I wasn't able to get the first batch all the way through, but, you know, it still works. So anyway, the nose isn't as powerful as the nose was on the unaged rye, and certainly isn't, as you saw last week, as the actual single barrel rye. But nonetheless, let's go in for, actually, you know what? Brought the glass of water out so you can clean the palate. Might as well use it since I forgot the other week. Even at 2 years, and I think it's because of this the really deep charred oak barrels that go into any Jack Daniel's product. It's really imparting the flavor that you're going to see in the final product, which is great. A little bit of a segue, when there was a little bit of weirdness going on when the Single Barrel Rye was first advertised, because I had seen it in a pretty popular trade publication, advertised along, I believe it was the Single Barrel Barrel Proof. Both of those were advertising being released around the same time, and after reporting on that, telling people about that, posting about it, asking more, when is it going to be here, more information, the proof and all that sort of stuff, there was a little bit of flack that I got because apparently they didn't want it released quite yet. Or apparently the marketing team was not on the same page as the distillery producing team, because there was a little bit of a mix-up going on, and I was commenting on the Single Barrel page on Facebook and was banned from the Facebook page, and still am to this day, because I brought it up and talked about basically just wondering if I could find any more information about this. I wasn't being a dick. I wasn't saying, well, why are you doing this, or saying anything negative. I was merely asking a question, as most people do who want more information about what they're going to be spending their money on in the stores. And so I don't know what the backlash was for. I contacted the customer service at Jack Daniel's, and still nothing. So that's on them. But nonetheless, I'm here for how the product tastes. I'm here. I like Jack Daniel's because the people who make it and make a decent quality product. I could really care less about the marketing people or anything like that if they're going to act like that. But anyway, I think there was something going on where this was being ready to be released. And maybe there was a mix-up with the teams there, and they thought, well, maybe this isn't the best quality product yet. Maybe it's not ready for the shelves. And I think what happened is that that fire had to be put out, and it was on hold for several months. I'm talking like 6-7 months before any news of this resurfaced. And I believe they released the Single Barrel Proof around where I was, and then the Rye about a month or two after that. So anyway, something weird was going on there. But back to the Rested Rye, but I just thought you'd like the little story time. I love the Rested Rye because you get to see really the whole growing up, really, of the newborn, really. It's like a sped up process where you get to see them start to absorb things from the world and take on their own unique personality and creativity and all that sort of thing. And you see them begin to blossom, coming into their own. Oh, it's really poetic, but that's really what's happening with the Rested Rye. And it was great to have it right alongside the whole maturation process. You know, we got the Unaged Rye 2 years later, we got the Rested Rye, just as it was happening in the distillery. Now, obviously, a lot of this wasn't released because most of it was being saved for the actual product that they wanted to end up with, the Single Barrel Rye. So, anyway, you're starting to get a lot of those notes, a little bit of the caramel, the fruitiness, which is turning into a combination and intertwining with the bakery notes, the malty characteristics, really creamy scents, which I think intertwines and leads into that banana note that I got and talked about in last week's video. Again, you're getting a little bit of that spice, not overly so. It's more of a peppery, spicy note to it rather than a more robust, fruity, rye explosion spice, if you will. Like I've said before, once rye becomes the predominant grain in the mash bill, a lot of times it takes on a fruitier quality rather than the spiciness that a lot of people attribute to rye whiskeys, specifically Canadian whiskeys. A lot of those have a raw, earthy spicierness to it. Not like a single pot still Irish whiskey, which has a really, it's earthy, but in a sense it's more profound, it's deep, it's covered with vanilla notes and tobacco leaves and figs and Christmas cake and all those type of warm, holiday, beautiful notes. But this is specific in and of its own, and that's taking on a really fruity quality. We'll take one more pass at this before we move on to Single Barrel Rye. Yeah, this really interesting, just coming into its own. The sweet, the tardiness to it, slightly sour, a lot of banana, little creaminess, hint of cinnamon and vanilla, and just a hint of lemon in there, which is interesting. Just gives it a little spice, a little light, a little juice up there. And we won't go too in depth with this because I just did it last week. So, really just an incredible journey overall with these. So let's go in and look at the color. Let's compare the two. Obviously, you got a lot deeper color there in the single barrel rye. It's got a very warm apricot, slightly orangish tint to it, which is really nice. So let's go in for the nose. And actually first, clean the palate again. Getting that strong banana, that creaminess, that rye spiciness is coming into play. It's really nice, and like I said last week, it's almost like a dessert Jack Daniel's expression, if you will, which is unique and just really strange to say. Yeah, just really, whatever happened with the whole process, I'm glad they waited until Jeff Arnett got to a final product that he was happy with, because I think anybody who picks up this bottle is going to be really, even if you don't like the taste, you can appreciate that a majority of people will like it, especially because of the fact that they haven't changed the recipe, the mash bill, since before Prohibition, which is just crazy. And they've just surfed on this wave of success for so long, from basically the same product aged in a different way, mellowed in charcoal twice, or adding staves into it, but not changing the mash bill of the recipe, which is interesting. So, you know, there you have the full gamut there. I want to see what happens. I mean, why the hell not? If we pour some of the unaged, it'll be basically like we're just almost adding water to it, but not. Just adding neutral spirit to the rested rye. I just want to see what happens. If an unaged and a two-aged get together, does that make a 1-year-old Tennessee whiskey? I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see what this tastes like. And I'm sure it's probably just going to taste like an in-between of the two products. But I'm not going to add it to the final product, because that's just doesn't need to happen. Definitely the unaged rye, the nose comes through on that, that's for sure. The rested rye is a lot more subtle, so it's taking a back seat to the unaged rye, obviously. And that's actually pretty damn tasty. That's really good. I might as well just mix both of these bottles. Might as well. Empty half of them, fill the other one with it. That's really good. The initial flavors that you get are the creamier vanilla, cinnamon, slightly oaked notes. And then after that, it's like seeing a play and the curtain closes on the end of the act and back up, we're in somewhere different. And that's what you get when this comes in during the second act, and you get those really ripe, astringent, sour grape notes, slightly chemical, but imparts a really long finish to it, which I think is great. Yeah, that is interesting. I suggest you try that if you got 2 of these bottles. I know a lot of people will be holding on, if they do have bottles of the unaged and the rested rye, thinking that later down the line, 10, 15, 20 years, are going to be worth an incredible amount of money, because you have those crazy Jack Daniel's collectors out there, and I know I'll probably get some dislikes for that if they're watching this, because they are some hardcore people about collecting. Even if it's just like a special edition whiskey that's they haven't really done anything different with. Again, just go back to my last video, and here we talk about the Sinatra Century, which is marketing disaster. And it's just, yeah, a bunch of scam artists there with the synopsis entry. Tastes good, but when you wake up the next morning and your wallet is about 70% lighter, yeah, then come talk to me about how good it was. So anyway, let's take one last pass at it, and we'll get out of here. Nothing to be said that hasn't been said before. That is interesting. I'm glad I did that. Anyway, next time we get back with you, we are going to explore something a little bit different. We're going to be pairing something with whiskey, and it's going to be a flight, if you will. We're on the whole path of these little journeys here, which I think is interesting. And a lot of people just do, the one-offs. The Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Rye, that's what people are looking for. Type, click, and there you got your review, which obviously I do those, but you would just want to liven it up. Do things like this that just give you comparisons, contrasting things, giving you history beyond the journey, and anytime we can find something that's a progression all the way up through, get it as a series, it's nice to do. Even with things that are the same whiskey in terms of mash bill, that sort of thing, but even if the ages are different, that's also fun to do, to see how things take on different flavors and aromas at different ages and what tastes better, because some people, let's say Redbreast, right? The 21-year-old is absolutely phenomenal. And I love the 12-year cask strength. That is just amazing. I'm afraid to touch that bottle just because it'll go away too fast. And then you have people who say the 15 is just, it's okay. It's good, but it's okay. So it's just interesting in the whole progression of things, how you can have something that bookends it, really, and it's, a different experience than the other two. You'd think that it's a linear sort of progression going up, but it's not always the case. And it's definitely subjective to people's views, which is always interesting, which is why I always go around and look at other people's reviews just to see what they're thinking, and then I'll get on here and be like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about, this is great. So, anyway, that's it for this week. Join us next time for some more fun, and till then, if you're going to drink responsibly, and we'll see you next time.